Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming to our webinar. I hope you're all having a great week so far. Today, we are very happy to have Bill Malchisky from Effective Software Solutions and Serdar Bashamez from Developy Information Systems with us for their session titled Back from the Dead, When Bad Code Kills a Good Server. This webinar is brought to you as part of the free monthly webinar series from Team Studio and TLCC. My name is Courtney. I'm the marketing manager at Team Studio. I'm here today helping to run this webinar along with Howard Greenberg from TLCC. If you are attending the Engage user group event in Belgium next week, please stop by Team Studio's booth to say hello. We love seeing old friends and meeting new ones. We'll be giving demos of our tool advisor that recommends a forward path for each of your apps based on comprehensive data analytics, as well as all our software tools for Notes and Domino professionals. And if you won't be at Engage, you can always catch up with Team Studio's latest product info, tips, and job postings at our blog. Okay, now Howard is going to go over some administrative items for this webinar, like how to ask questions. Then we'll give Bill the floor. Over to you, Howard.
Oh, thank you, Courtney, and welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Just before we start, a little bit about TLCC. Hopefully you're seeing my slides there. We've been around since 1997, and we do self-paced distance learning courses for Notes and Domino, and of course, Xpages. And so we have an entire catalog of self-paced courses. We can also do any of our courses on site as a private class, and we also do mentoring and consulting. Some of our best-selling courses are free demo courses, so I invite you to come to our website and try them out if you haven't tried out a TLCC course yet. As I mentioned, we have Xpages courses. We have 7 Xpages courses, so if you're getting started in Xpages or been doing it for a while and not sure if you're doing it right or not, or just want to maybe learn some new skills like Java, please check out our website. I want to give a shout out to my friend Theo, who is hosting the Engage conference. This is a really great event. I think he's expecting 400 people next week. So if you can make it to Antwerp, Belgium next week, I highly suggest you try to go. It's free, great price. And he has a number of great speakers. I know Bill's going to be there. He's flying over across the pond to speak, as well as many other great speakers. Many IBM Champions are going to be speaking there. So if you're over in Europe or can get to Europe easily next week, check that out. For those back here in the US, my home country, I'm looking forward very much to MW Lug. That's going to be August 8th through 10th in basically Washington, D.C. It's actually Alexandria, which is a few minutes from the Washington, D.C. airport. Right now, registration is open. You can sign up to attend, but you can also put in an abstract to be a speaker. And the MW Lug actually reserves 25% of the speaker slots for people who've never spoken before at a conference. So if there's something you want to talk about, here's a great chance to break into speaking at conferences. It's a lot of fun. I highly suggest it. So, if you have some ideas that you want to share with the technical professionals in the Notes and Domino world or the IBM Collaborative Solutions world, put in an abstract and see what happens. All the speakers go for free, but even if you don't want to speak, the MW Lug conferences cost all of $75. For $75, you get all the technical sessions, breakfast and lunch, reception, and lots of fun activities. And it's a really great event. I really encourage you to try to go. In our next webinar in June, I believe it's going to be June 13th. We haven't finalized the registration link yet, but we will put that in the email that goes out to all the attendees today. And that's going to be Christian Gudeman and Martin Janak. I'm probably mispronouncing their names, and I apologize. They're going to be speaking about a new project on OpenNTF called Smart NSF. And that's a way to take your Domino data and surface it as a REST API. I think it does a lot more than that. So I'm looking forward myself to learning more about this project. There's talk that it will be eventually rolled up into the extension library. And then, of course, things that are in the extension library tend to make it into IBM's feature pack list for a potential feature pack. So this is a very important project that is right now in beta. So if you can attend, I suggest you try to attend that next webinar. Again, it's probably going to be June 13th, and watch your post-attendee or post-webinar email for a link to register for that. So we'll get started in a second. Before we do, I just want to mention how we're going to handle questions and answers. In the GoToWebinar interface, you can go to the questions pane and ask your questions. We will answer your questions at the end verbally. So we're not actually going to answer your questions in the questions and answers pane, but that's how you can ask your questions, and then we'll answer them verbally when Bill and Serdar are done. So please, as we're going along, ask your questions as they come up, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. We should have plenty of time for questions and answers. So let me introduce two IBM champions, both of whom I've known for quite a few years, Serdar and Bill. Serdar is a developer expert. He not only does Notes and Domino development, but he's been getting involved a lot into server plugins and a lot of other high-end development around the Domino platform. So he's a very experienced developer. And Bill is likewise a very experienced administrator. He runs a company that provides administration consulting services to customers, and Bill's out of the New York area. And I should mention that Serdar is speaking to us from Turkey. So Bill, I'm going to pass controls over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. So let me...
You should have that.
Yep, and I see that, and I'm going to go and throw the slides up here. Yep. You should have that visible in just 1 second.
I see that now, Bill.
Okay, so I think we're good, right? Everybody can see that?
We are good. Take it away.
Awesome. So again, hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Howard, and it's great to be here along with Serdar. So imagine a Domino server which suddenly begins underperforming, heavily impacting end users. It's possible the administrator has done something untoward, but more likely, it's a tightly interwoven set of conditions responsible for the situation. Finding the problem's root cause is often delayed when admin teams are understaffed and only capable of operating in break-fix mode, or if the server is new or otherwise unfamiliar. This extends the time to resolution out intolerably for users, and worse, the true root cause may not be fully understood. We believe even the best administrator cannot prevent what bad code can introduce. So we recommend collaborating as a team to solve advanced problems. As we go through the presentation, we invite you to discover scenarios that may help you introduce best or better practices at work. By working together, administrators and developers can resolve the most cumbersome of support situations, ultimately keeping your end users happy, helping Domino remain in your environment, and avoid future support situations with better design, something both administrators and developers can support. I'm Bill Malchisky, and I'm here today with my co-presenter and top-notch developer, Serdar Bashimaz. We both solve some very complex problems in our careers. So come, let's see what we're offering. So let's see here. There we go. Okay, so just basically the standard legal disclaimer, because we do have a lot of trademarked information. We do like to be ethical and legal. So the preface, what we have today is a story that we worked on together, a case study and a joint project. And so we're going to go through the beginning, how it all happened. the search for clues, ultimately creating a solid foundation for the ultimate solution, and then looking at the soft side on the application side. So even though there's 4 primary sections, the information that both Sadar and I will be providing will be about equal in terms of time. So there'll be enough for the administration side, which is of interest to the developers, as well as the development side. So I think this will be a good session for the audience we have here. And of course the results, because without that, what's the point, right? So dun 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 dun. Attempt a dragnet, but sometimes it doesn't quite go. I'm a bit off key. Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. So for example, Acme Corporation is simply going to be referred to as Acme Inc. So from here, what we want to do is set some expectations about what we're going to cover and what we're not going to cover. So we are going to go through problem analysis, troubleshooting skills, best practices, of course, because that's always very important, and making sure that people are aware of impact of suboptimal applications and how they can affect the user as well as the server. What we are going to omit, of course, is boring, rambling, dry lectures and useless drivel, because that wastes everybody's time. So now, within the beginning, this came in at, it's about 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I got a phone call from a customer. Hey, Bill, we're having a problem. Sure, I'm happy to help. What's going on? Well, we have a mission critical application, and it's really upsetting our users. It's way too slow. And yeah, I've seen Windows 3.1 systems on a 386 box with 32 megabytes of RAM that had better performance than what we're experiencing right now. Any idea what changed? We have no idea, but we know we didn't touch the box. Famous last words, right? How many times have we heard that from a customer? So from here, let's look at why servers fail. You have, as I've certainly seen throughout my career, although very well intentioned, you have customers that haven't been trained well, their support teams haven't been trained well. People tend to rotate through, they get promotions, and then there's not enough knowledge transfer. So for whatever reason, there's just a lack of expertise or knowledge. It's not necessarily always the fault of the individual that's there, but sometimes it can be. You have unplanned expansion, people just grow without a plan. And so then there's just a lot of duct tape. We'll deal with it later, and later never really happens, and you're just always dealing and putting out the fires. They don't have a dedicated administrator. You have a person who is split between multiple jobs, so the care and feeding that you normally would give a system doesn't actually occur. I've been to some companies that have amazing change management. You can't do anything, even including breathing, without signing off 3 or 4 forms and going through meetings and so forth. And there's others that are just completely free reign. And have free reign to do whatever they want, and nobody knows about it until something breaks, and then it's a major project to resolve things. Lack of monitoring, they don't want to pay for the monitoring tools, so they have no idea that things are going on, which is akin to putting duct tape over the check engine light. If you don't see it, everything's great. And then they just constantly are putting in workarounds rather than the solution, because that takes effort, and they're already understaffed. So when you start combining all this stuff, it gets pretty cumbersome, mundane over time. So knowing that those are the reasons why, let's look at the initial search for clues. What do you do while you're waiting up? So I always liken this to round up the usual suspects. So while you're waiting for access, because inevitably your customers are going to call, they're going to want you to come in, or even within your organization, it may be a new system, you may not have all the rights you need. So while you're waiting to get access to the system, request immediately so that you can do analysis and kind of grease the skids, get the INI, get the log files, run show tasks, find out what's going on right now. The top, for those unfamiliar, gives me the top performing processes, virtual memory statistics, the I/O system performance on disk I/O, so what's going on with read-write operations. The file systems, are they full? the affected users, I want them to be able to ping, give me some ping results. Mounting, so I can see where the file systems are, what is where, how many drives we're looking at. All these provide clues. The swap on -s will give me the location and availability of the swap space, and of course get a copy of the nav without the users. You really aren't going to need that, but you're going to want the server pieces specifically. Sometimes the groups are helpful, but more likely it's all the connection and program documents and so forth. And that will provide a lot of good information. And the key thing here is how fast they get you this information indicates how bad the situation is. If it takes them 2 days to get you access, okay, the initial crisis is over, but you still got to resolve. But if they can get you all this information in a couple hours and you have access in a couple hours, you better clear the decks. Now, what we did here is initially we went through DCT, returned some items, but Configuration Tuner had nothing that was applicable to really what we were experiencing. So when it takes a person on the manufacturing floor 20 minutes to open up a document, and it's so bad that they actually go through, get coffee, or take their lunch break to open up one document so they know what tool to make next, that's a huge delay in cost to the customer. So wanting to find the solution to the problem at hand is critical. So we looked again at the Domino statistics, looked at it located a key issue in terms of, which was essentially the solution for that was going to be a needle in a haystack, because the SAI was fluctuating all over the place and wildly. It would go from 18% for minutes and then would rise sharply again. And it was just high volatility, oscillating wildly. So that's something that was helpful for us, but it was something that indicated that there was a bigger problem going on. Locating NASD files is always helpful, but there weren't any in this scenario. So since I have a developer audience, some may not be familiar with IOStat and VMstat, I wanted to put some information there. So the obvious question is, well, if this is a TLCC session and the X Pages webinar series, why are we going through this? Because I train a lot of developers on setting up Domino systems so that they could do testing, because the companies don't have the budget for additional servers, and they don't have, or they want to be able to do some work at home, and they want to be able to know how to do this correctly. And so these are some little tips and tricks that you can take, and you'd be surprised at some of the names that are really interested in being able to do some of this at home and set up their own servers. So I want to give you some insight as well, because I think it's going to be very useful. So IOStat lets you know on the disk I/O. So when you're looking through the setup, now this is not from the customer data, because that would violate the NDA, but I took this from my own system just to give you an example of what happens. And you're going to be looking at transactions per second, which is the second column, the device or the file systems, but the transaction per second, and then basically you're just going to be looking at read and write operations. If anything is really high, or if your average CPU is very high, then these are going to be a value to the I/O weight is what's the wait state. So that's generally going to be, you want that to be not too high, not too low. That's not kind of an answer, because you want it to be waiting more than not in many cases. If it's not so busy systems, things can go wrong. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Hey, Bill.
But basically, yeah,
Howard.
looking for hi, Howard.
I'm sorry. What slide? The slide that we're seeing, Sridhar, seemed to indicate your slides may not be changing. What we're seeing, it says data everywhere.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. Oh, you're right. I'm looking at what you guys are seeing in my slide. Thank you. Yeah, I advanced beyond that, and it's not coming through. That's odd. I have a full connection, and I'm shown as being online. Why is it not?
Try stop showing your screen and then restart it. See what happens.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Thank you. Okay, well, it says that I just got an error that my connection's been lost. That's odd. Okay, because I'm online. Huh. Let's try this again then.
Bill, there we go. We got quick example.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Now
I'm back in then.
That's good. Okay.
Is it there?
Yes, it says
Okay.
quick example, IOStat, BM stat.
Perfect, great. Okay, so let me just go back here through this very quickly and then we'll move on. Great. So again, IOStat, basically the second column down here just gives you the transactions per second, and you're basically just looking for a high number of kilobytes read or written. And down in VM, you're really looking to see what's going on in virtual memory and some of the numbers down there in terms of if you have a high or low utilization. And those can just provide some clues. So that's basically what I wanted to cover on this slide. So let's move on to make up some of the time. So once we did that, it's important to watch the server when nobody else does. A lot of strange things happen on systems in the middle of the night. And so early on when this was occurring, I was up 3, 4 in the morning watching the system console, and observed multiple instances where over 1 million records would be processed in a 15-minute interval at different times in the middle of the night, a few nights a week. And the customer had no clue this was going on. That's highly unusual and indicating to me a bigger problem, but also is a cause for some of the SAI, server availability index, fluctuations. So being able to see that there were a lot of things going on in the middle of the night and where some conflicts were occurring can also be very helpful. Now, on the initial data analysis side, swap space was 50% of the installed memory. That's generally not the way you do it. It's generally the other way. You want more swap than RAM, and they had half as much. And the problem was that memory was under a gig. They had roughly 600 to 700 megs of memory, and swap space was half of that on a mission critical system. So I can, even though I know the audience is muted, I'm sure there's a few people out there that are chuckling right now. So and when you have a system that has over 100,000 documents in there, that's just a recipe for disaster. And you combine that with the amount of processing they were doing, the type of application it was, which was processing a lot of documents, what happens is then you start page faulting and a lot, and it was just consistently killing performance. And so this just kind of fed on itself and became a snowball. The system was properly patched, fortunately, and free space was adequate, but the base to let it run was not there. In the notes NI basically provided some good information, server layout and ID and so forth. Inevitably, what's going to happen, particularly in a system you've never been on before, and for the reasons I talked earlier in the presentation about why systems fail, there were multiple Domino data directories on this mission critical server. So when you come in and you see 3 notes INI files, 3 data directories, 3 versions of NSF files, which one are you using? The notes INI file and pointing to the Domino system, you're going to be able to tell you which one it was. And inevitably, some of the files were in one directory and some were in another. So it was very chaotic, and we're able to get that all merged and cleaned up. But that's also going to cause some conflict. But that's how you can figure out what is pointing where. But outside of that, other than providing clues, there weren't any additional problems. Agent Manager, this is where things got interesting, because now we had the aha moment. Agents were running 24/7, all hours, day and night. Agents fire every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, agents running all the time. Multiple databases. While Compact was running through a program document, Agent Manager was running every 5 to 10 minutes on the system that had hundreds of thousands of documents in there, and these agents are processing and doing orders on hundreds of thousands of documents while attempting to be compact and update and fix up, all running simultaneously on the same NSF. This is an absolute disaster. And of course, they ran this over the weekends when they were doing backups as well, and it just killed performance. And they had and they were running 3 shifts, which meant that the databases were all actively used. So there's no consideration for the needs of everything. Everybody was just trying to get in there at the same time. So you had overlapping program documents. You had compact that never finished. So you had databases that were partially compacted or just kept failing and just never got there. The largest databases were completely suboptimal because compact never finished or the execution ceiling time hit before it ever got to them. It was connecting to systems that didn't exist. So I got connection documents going off, doing TCP timeouts, trying to find systems constantly every 5 to 10 minutes, and the systems were no longer on the network. So again, that's causing a performance impact. You had replication documents with delays with replica synchronization because of the way that they were being routed was inefficient, and data never synchronized across the domain because of the timeouts and the way the hop counts were set up. The route path out creating a lot of hop counts, and it was exceeding thresholds in certain cases. And the best part was that when they would replicate to another system, the connectivity document only covered, they explicitly listed databases rather than doing a whole directory. So the mission critical applications weren't even being replicated properly across the other systems. So there's a lot going on here, and you had, and it just gets more interesting as you go. We had databases that hadn't been fixed up in 2 years. So 30 to 70% used space, which if you've ever right-clicked on your NSF, your mail file, and you've gone to percent used, you want to keep that number over 90%. When it's in 30 to 75%, extremely inefficient. You want to get that cleaned up, but they couldn't do it. And they had so many views in the database, and the views indices, as most of the people on here know, or if not all, every 45 days the an unused view index will be removed. And so somebody will come by in the 46th or 50th day, click on it, and it would go through and run and check all 200,000 documents. And then it would just balloon again, and then it would contract, and it was doing this. So having a lot of views is not necessarily a good idea, and that's where it gets into the design aspect. There were no design documents, there's no templates, there's no attachment, design compression, so there's just so much here. And in the design that we're running was setting templates that didn't exist. So whatever the developer was doing never was actually even pushed down to the NSFs that were being used. So that was just in vain. So oh yeah, we'll fix it, and then the user never gets it and nobody knew why. So looking at all of that, that's a lot of information, a lot of clues. So from there, we want to actually make a solid foundation and see what we get out of there. So immediately, swap space used to be 1.5. We'd always do basically 2 times on the RAM. So it's not a hard fast rule right now, but I still find with customers 1.5 to 2 times the RAM is good. And if you've got 32 gigs on a server, I mean, you're looking at 64 gigs of swap. Do you really need that? But no, 48 to 64, somewhere in there is generally a good range on a busy server. But you want 4 gigs of memory per processor on your mission critical boxes. If you have VMware and you're doing this virtualized, avoid the temptation for too many processors. It's counterintuitive, and you want to keep that number on the lower end rather than the higher end for better performance. And make sure that all your partitions have free space. Any operating system, whether it's Windows, Linux, mainframe, iSeries, if your file systems get below 10% free space, they start fragmenting wildly, and then that creates an issue. So you always want to keep them on that. And that's true even on your home systems and your desktop machines. So if you're looking for performance issues, look at your free space, and that will help you out. On the OS side, make sure that the previous made system changes stick. I've been to sites where we'll go in and patch it, and then a month later, some other team comes in, oh yeah, we have to do this, and they remove everything. So people who are unfamiliar with it, make sure that they know what's going on and that everything's documented, and that they know that this is the change being made. And that's where a good change management process comes in, so people don't revert what you're doing. Always check for IBM tech notes, and once the OS is working, you make sure that if you're doing any virtualization, of course, that's running optimally as well. But you want to have the underlying, whether you're using Linux or doing a virtualization layer, hypervisor or something, that you always have that running optimally as well. After that, tier 2, looking at the Domino, always space out properly your program documents. Don't overlap your agents and with program documents. If you're going to do up to all compact, make sure there's plenty of time to finish. Look in the log file to see how long it took for an instance to run. And you can do that manually, and then make sure you give yourself plenty of cushion for growth in the future, so you don't have to go back and adjust these every few weeks or few months. And when you're doing this the first time and doing cleanup, schedule a whole weekend to complete the first full maintenance set. Compact especially is going to take significantly longer than you realize. The first run on this system, for me, it took over 27 hours just for Compact to run. It was that bad. So you can't do that when you're running 3 shifts, and you can't do that when you're running in the middle of the work week. You can't take a system down that long. So we were able to do this over a holiday weekend, and we had the opportunity. Fortunately, the timing worked, and we're able to take the system out for 48 hours, and it worked really well. But you got to make sure that you allow for that. And then from there, make sure all the business managers are aligned and everybody else knows what to do from there, and the needed jobs are available. So somebody has to come back in the middle of the maintenance window to do some critical work, that you're able to offer that as well, and you know about it ahead of time. If there's any additional Domino features like compression and so forth, or any of the newer features that come in with the releases, you always want to make sure that they're. If you're gonna set up cluster replication, make sure that the cluster member actually exists. I know that sounds odd, but host names and so forth, you always want to check that stuff. DNS is critical. Chris Miller talks about this in a lot of his sessions, making sure that DNS is there and you can resolve everything, because then it's not my problem. If it doesn't work, it's somebody else's issue, the network guys. Remove all the unneeded and deprecated network ports. Keep it lean and clean and things, and then you don't have to worry about when something breaks, because the stuff is there. Now, having done all of this, the app still didn't work, and we were still looking at significant delays. So that tells you that there's something else going on. At this point, this is when you bring in the big guns. So ring, 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 ring. Sardar?
Yes, Bill.
Hey, Sardar, I've got a problem with an application for a customer. Do you have some time to take a look at it?
Yes, of course. Did they change anything?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I know that feeling. Yeah, I'm sure.
Good luck.
Okay.
Good luck, sir.
Thank you. Okay, guys. Now it's time for some developer magic, and we are at a point where our Domino administrator, a clever admin, handled the first level analysis, hopefully the first level treatment. Okay, so still we have issues, and if we are lucky enough, we have already spotted that something's wrong with the mission critical application, and it's our turn now. But it will not be so easy, because we have the oldest and ugliest problem of any developer. Next slide, please. Yeah, it's somebody else's code. You know that feeling? You don't have a clue what the former developer did. Probably there is no documentation, maybe a couple of lines of commands, and that's all. You don't have any information on that. And here your mission is try to solve out this application and find a needle in the haystack. What goes wrong with the application? What is causing that performance issue or any other issue they have reported? Next, please. So at this point, let's step back and talk about why Domino applications fail in general. This is quite similar to what we see in Bill's deck. Just like Domino servers, Domino applications are also failing a lot. That's not because Domino is not a solid platform, but Domino applications fall in a spot where best practices might be omitted frequently. They don't get enough care by the paper processes, and sometimes we can see that apart from developer work, we can see that nobody even knows what that application does exactly. There's a small need to be covered in a typical scenario, like you start with a little expense approval application, then the application starts growing and growing unbalanced, and you find yourself in a full-scale purchase order application, purchase order processing application. undocumented code, undocumented business process, no change management, quick and dirty development, patches, etc. Next, please. More specifically, when it comes into performance problems, it gets more difficult because obviously the solution will not be there. There's no magic pill. That's generally because problems mostly depend on the situation. Who clicked that button? How they clicked? Was it a single click, double click after a long pause? And believe me, the last one is a real story. Also, in a controlled environment, you have to repeat this issue. You need the proof. You can't just fix some potential reasons and expect something you did might resolve the issue magically. At least in my case, if you are a consultant like myself, no customer will accept such an invoice. So you need to be boringly and tediously systematical on that. Yes, slide please. So I'm talking about scientific process. Yeah, we need to approach such problems just like a scientist. Slide. We should assess, research, make educated guesses. We need to experiment, maybe sometimes iterate this cycle over and over again until we come up with a solution. Also, when we find a solution, we should analyze this, validate if it's fixing our problem or not, or just another patch. Slide, please. So the research and assessment phase is generally straightforward. We collect some information from the field. Symptoms generally provide some clues for us about where to look. Also, at this point, the most important thing to do is we are looking into a pattern. We have incidents on one side, the data on the other side, so there should be a pattern between them. For instance, a server crashing every night, 3 a.m. That might be a clue. That might be an agent. That might be a scheduled task that's causing the issue. And such a pattern will be a great starting point. Next slide, please. So
Yeah, I advanced it, so we're giving it just a second here. I'm not sure what the delay is, but I did advance it, so give it just a second to resolve.
Okay. So here's a simple checklist I use for such investigation. This is generally the first thing my customers get from me. It's quite similar into an admin case. We need more log files from various locations, some configuration data, especially important thing is the application code, maybe dependencies, etc. If you attended Bill's bashing admin session last years, you would know that this entire process actually automated through scripting, especially on Linux servers. Next, please. The next step is to isolate the application. This is very important. We need to isolate that specific application so we can attack to it without disturbing anyone. You can't and you should not work on production, and I'm sure no one here does that. I'm pretty sure that. Playing on production systems is quite dangerous, you know, especially, for instance, an X-Space application may stop even just because you opened in Designer. There might be side effects, there might be other data source connections, there might be dependencies, all sorts of problems can happen at this phase. Slide, please. Sorry. So just like in the admin side, we have also usual suspects. When I start inspecting an application, this is the first thing I do. There are so many bad practices out there that can slow down or crash an application. And sometimes the two or more suspects join together and cause unexpected issues. So assessing them upfront would be quite useful. And I can say that more than 50% of problems will be eliminated at that stage. This is a very important step. And you might have nothing yet, and we need to dig deeper into the case. And this is the fun part, because we are now detectives and we are looking into more unusual clues about the problem. But now we need some assistance. When digging deep, we are also out of our limits on most topics. If we are a developer, we have to touch into administrative parts. If we are an admin, we need to know something about some stuff about development part. So deeper investigation will be a teamwork task. Collaborate with your admin to get more evidence on the case, and you need to share your expertise for this win-win situation. For instance, you might need to test things on production as a last resort, of course, and you need an admin for this very dangerous task. And sometimes you may find the problem, but you need a hand for the solution. So you also need to cooperate for a valid solution. Okay, before wrapping up, let's review a couple of cases from my own portfolio. On one case, the customer had JVM crash with the HTTP task. It was on random times. There was no pattern in the log. Memory dumps pointed a leak in the JVM heap, which means the Nextbase application is failing. We have inspected Xbase applications. All Xbase applications were just document libraries or team rooms, etc. Everything was standard, nothing found. But after some intensive debugging, we have triangulated the problem into one specific Xbase application. We isolated the application for a load test. I wrote a little Node.js script and simulated a load test. We found nothing. We increased logging. We collected more data. No hope. After a while, we checked the server configuration and noticed something. Our logging data was incomplete. Deeper dig has shown us that we have exclusions in logging data. We have removed that exclusions, and we noticed that there were searching software internally crawling a specific page, but crawling at hundreds of requests per second. Page was generating a state data that fills up the memory, and we simulated the exact crash on the test environment, and just one line of code fixed the issue. We just said that this application should not generate a state data with a specific type of request. Generally, it's an admin problem, but only an experienced Xpage developer can know that pages are generating a lot of state data. Another case, this was a bank, a mission-critical application at a bank, web application with 2,000 plus users. There were CPU spikes and random hangs, mostly afternoon. Logs were clear, there were no crashes, no error messages, and we isolated the application and we inspected the usual suspects. This case were the first 50% because we found a web agent forcing an update on a view. So we triangulated the problem to that specific web agent using weblogs and SEM debug. Something's wrong with this web agent. Whenever it's called, the server has some random hangs or spikes. But we couldn't validate the issue on the test environment. So we cooperated with the admin. If you know banks, you know it's quite difficult to get some data from the fields. Even a copy of notes INI or names NSF, you should have a lot of signatures to get an approval. Bill? We had detailed assessment on the server configuration after a while, and we found the issue. You remember the web agent forcing a view update? We have also server task at 14 running upload task and combining with a program file which is running upload on a specific database every 30 minutes, all combined, and at specific times the problem explained. We applied this to the test platform, validated by a load test, and problem just gone. And here I get back to Bill about results.
Excellent. Thank you, Sardar. And I'll add, if you don't mind, a recent example I just uncovered with a customer to echo your piece. They had put in a custom view in the address book. The developer had written a nice view which reverse engineered membership for groups to the people. Okay,
yeah.
Great. And so they put that in there. Now, some of the people on this call may not realize that IBM will not support custom views in the NAB. So if your server breaks this, and they're going to ask you to look at the custom view, which was the issue, because the view was nice, but the developer had set the refresh rate on the view index to be immediate. They had 200,000 groups. So,
yeah.
and they pushed this out through the entire company. So mail performance took a hit because anytime HR would do an automatic feed through Tivoli, the entire network would just hang. It would just, everything would just drop, and mail routing would suffer as all these view indices would update, and it was set to immediate. So the fix was understanding that although it's important and there's a business need for that view, talk to the administrator and finding out what's appropriate for the view refresh. And they actually adjusted the settings so that you had to be a designer or above to create the view index. So that way it wasn't being created on every server, A, and B, doing it to once a day. And so that then dramatically changed things, and they set the schedule for the view index refresh in the middle of the night, and suddenly everything worked. But again, a little thing like that, well-intentioned, yeah, it sounds good, we won't want to do that, but understanding the effect of the attributes on the development side impact the admin side, and this is another example of how we can work better together. So back to the customer case here. What we did is after all the work that Sardar and I performed for this customer, what was the results? And we found that through the quality analysis that we did, if you really take the time to go through and be thorough, you get quality results. So all the page faults that happened, gone, reduced to zero. The general database and usage and administration, all the tasks were working well. SAI was now over 80% sustained. The weird overnight agents, system operations, those million record processing, all gone. Key databases are now over the 93% used on a regular basis. So the views in the white space are gone. The views are operating in an optimal manner. Everything's been compressed. Design, documents, attachments, all are compressed. The databases are much smaller. Backups are taking less time. Program documents have all been adjusted to finish properly with no overlap and allow for breaks on weekends and when the breaks are a little longer, and working on the shifts, because again, we're running 3 shifts at the manufacturing plant. So we took all of the openings into account and adjusted the program documents accordingly, so that way people are not attempting to access the database while program documents are running.
My takeaway at this point, sorry.
No, I'll finish up quickly. The one point is,
okay.
Just one more point, and then back to Sudhar. When you make a lot of changes like this, most people are not going to know. They complain when it doesn't work, but suddenly things start working and it's very subtle, and they're just going in and they're doing the job. So don't expect a lot of feedback. But if you go back and revert the change, then you're going to hear about it. And I found this consistent in every customer. Once I go in and sweep out, excuse me, when I go through and put through sweeping performance changes, and everything is magically faster, you don't hear about it. So it's a bit underwhelming, but that's how you know you're doing something good. Sudhar, all yours.
Yeah, my takeaway at this point is just about teamwork, because especially for the performance issues, neither an admin nor a developer could solve all of these kinds of issues alone. You need to know how the server performs at the admin side as a developer, and you need to know how application can fail at the developer side if you are an admin. So this is quite important to teaming at this point. Nobody is alone in such performance issues. All problems are somehow linked into administrator or developer side of the problem. Next slide, please. So one bonus slide here. You can always get help from such utilities while inspecting applications and servers. Team Studio is the sponsor today. Check out their products, because such products can help and can save huge time when you inspect applications or servers. And I'm Sardar Başyılmaz, and I'm an IBM champion, running my own company in Istanbul, and my co-speaker, Bill Malczyski. Bill?
Excellent. And been an IBM champion as well, the same duration as Sudhar, and do a lot in the space of Linux, both at Connect and various events, read books as well, and happy to always provide input therein on running IBM and software on Linux, especially with the Lotus software and Domino. So it's been great to be here as well. There's our contact information. So if you have any questions for us, you can find us through our blog, Skype, Twitter, email, of course. And on that end, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. So thank you, everybody, for attending. And we'd be happy to provide any input on questions or that you may have.
Thank you, Bill and Sudhar. That was great. Bill mentioned that he does the Linux Fest. He will be doing that. I believe, Bill, you'll be doing that at MWLUG as well?
Yes, I'm going to be doing a session there. We're doing Linux Fest at Midwest Lug, and I'll be doing a roundtable Linux discussion over at Engage next week. So really exciting stuff coming up in the next couple months. Okay, great. Yeah, it's good to know. Bill's definitely the Linux expert in the group, I would say, of the various IBM champions. I think everyone kind of looks up to Bill as the Linux expert.
So again, asking questions, I put back up on the screen how to ask questions. Use your questions pane. We do have a couple questions now, so please go ahead and put your questions in there. And before we get to the questions, just a little, again, reminder of some upcoming events. I mentioned Engage and MWUG, but there's some other events as well. On Thursday, I believe it is, there's an event in the UK that IBM's sponsoring. Connect comes to the UK. And there's the DNUG meeting in Germany and Social Connections in Chicago in the beginning of June. So just some other events that you might want to be aware of. So Bill and Serdar, we do have some questions. First question, Bill, maybe you can explain and go into a little more detail on the acronyms of DCT and SAI.
Yes.
And how do you get those?
Okay, so Domino Configuration Tuner is a product that IBM offers to go through and run a bunch of checks against a predetermined set of conditions. So they provide the file, and it will go out and check a server or servers and say, hey, you have an issue here, or this is a potential problem, we want to check into it, or we looked at these 50 things and everything is a-okay here. So it kind of gives you a quick way of automating something that administrators used to do manually. So it's kind of a nice base case to go in and do a quick check and see if everything is operating well. SAI is Server Availability Index, and that's in the Domino statistics area, and it allows you to understand how efficient your server is, or how much availability it has. So if the higher the availability, the less work your system is doing. So if you're having performance issues, that's a good indicator to check, because if the number's really low, that means it's really, really working hard. And Domino is very efficient. So if it's properly tuned, the SAI number is going to be much higher. And keeping it over 80% is generally a good rule of thumb.
Okay, and Bill, on the DCT, the Domino Configuration Tuner, you mentioned that's a product IBM has. Is there a charge for that?
No, it's part of your license with Domino. So yeah, so
okay, and that. People can download it from the typical place where they get Domino.
Yeah, I can give you some information as to where you can get it if you're unfamiliar. But yeah, I can certainly provide that for the post session notes. Sure.
Okay, thanks. That would be great. Here's one, Serdar, that you might be able to comment on, and I'll read this. One of our developers made a mistake of writing a recursive lotus script code. He didn't say if this is an agent or something else, but what happened was the agent code generated 80,000 emails before he could turn off the agent. Okay, so it is an agent. Do you have any recommendations on how to turn off the recursive code on Domino so that it would not execute for such a long time?
Yeah, that happened to me a couple of months ago. 5,000 emails to myself about error logs, and it happens. And sometimes you have no control over that. Sometimes your own code can do such mistakes. But generally, what I do is I process such loops with a counter plug. So they check with a counter if the loop exceeds, for instance, 15 or 25 or 30, depending on the situation. After that point, they should stop themselves and send an error log. This is mostly happening about send me if any problem like type of codes. For instance, the application has a loop, and if it fails, it should send a notification to the admin or to the developer about the problem. But if it doesn't leave the loop at that point, it could get hundreds of thousands of emails at a very short period of time that will crash servers, as well as it will fill up the logs, fill up the mailbox, and complete restart will be a solution to fix all kinds of side effects. So it's just about using this as a best practice. Use some kind of insurance plug into your code, into your loops all the time.
Okay, that's an excellent idea. And I think all of us as developers have somehow generated an endless loop. So not just when sending email, but anytime you're looping, to do a counter that can
Always.
break out at some time. Excellent idea for that all the developers should take note. Let me ask you a question, Bill, on this topic. Isn't there, if I remember from my admin days, and I'm a very rusty admin, isn't there a setting that you can control the maximum amount of time an agent can run?
Yeah, you can set that up as well. Not a lot of companies use it, but you can certainly put a threshold in on Agent Manager to stop tasks after a while. So the one case where that is generally ineffective is I've seen where somebody had an infinite loop, to go off of the previous example, and it was actually creating data, and it actually filled the file system up within a couple minutes and then just caused a crash. And then when the system was brought up again and we realized, okay, well, we have an issue, we found the data, we cleared it out, the agent started running again and it repeated the process. So we had to go in, and once we figured out it was, the agent and so forth, and you stop that. But you can do that, but depending on the type of loop and agent, what it's doing, it may be ineffective. So it's a deterrent and can be very helpful for general processing, but it's not always 100% effective.
Yes, true. And I think in this case, you can probably send out 80,000 emails in a couple seconds, which is probably
absolutely, yeah,
probably especially if it goes to the wrong people, like your customers or executives, that could pretty much not look very good. Okay, here's a question, Serdar. I think this might be a good one for you. Simon says he has an Xpage application that he says, quote unquote, gets decompiled randomly, or an Xpage. Have you ever experienced that before?
Yeah, there are some problems on Xpage compilation period of times. So the main problem I see until now, for instance, Paul Withers is the expert on this, but this template-based or single template applications, single copy applications are sometimes they have some issues on some cases. So Paul Withers has had some blog entries about that. That was one point I saw. Another point was, for instance, I'm using plugins, server-side plugins, and if I open a specific application that uses that kind of plugin on a designer that has no installed plugin, sometimes they just lose their compilation info. And to prevent such problem, you need to keep automated builds off all the time, especially if you are using that designer client to get into a production application. And I guess at the recent version, there I have heard some problems with FP8, but I haven't used it yet.
Okay. Thanks, Serdar. Another question from Ken. Any suggestions on problems that appear to occur for only a few users, even though there's hundreds of users on the same application?
I didn't have any issue with simultaneous users. Simultaneous users, right?
No, he just said a few users.
No, I don't remember an issue related to such a scenario. Bill,
okay.
you have?
Any suggestions on how to kind of track that down? If like you have, Joe and Harry are the ones who are always calling you with problems, but no one else has problems.
Yeah, in my case, that kind of users are generally the users with Turkish characters in their names. They are very specific. But I think logging might help in such problems. If you are talking
so in terms
about,
of, I'm sorry, finish. I thought you were pausing there.
No,
sorry,
no,
please finish.
you continue. Okay, you continue.
So just to make sure I understand the question on the admin side, because I know Sardar was handling it on the dev side, we're just concerned about users that have special characters in their names that are causing potential access issues, or?
No, I think it's Ken was just wondering, like, you just have a couple users who are complaining about an issue in an application, but the rest of the users, hundreds of other users are not complaining and they seem happy. So any suggestions on how to kind of just track those down that are related just to a couple particular users, any way to maybe find out information in the logs for a particular user, or any other tips you might have in that regard?
Sure, and actually I'm dealing with this right now, a customer I'm working with. I do level 3 support for a mission critical messaging app, and this is something I deal with quite a bit. So happy to provide some insight. It can be simple. It can be a simple thing as the difference between the users can be ACL issues with roles. So wanting to check what the difference is between those specific users and the others. They may have a lower or higher access. They may be in a different role with the system. They may be in a different office that has network issues. I've certainly seen that. I've seen issues where they had for a role, somebody removed the checkbox in an ACL, and so they weren't able to create documents. If there's a performance issue, they can have, I've seen this even just recently, where they had a laptop and they got replaced, and the image that was put on was corrupt. So whenever they would launch notes, they had performance issues in the application, and I actually went through and troubleshot that and was able to fix it up, but it was a corrupt image. So there's really nothing in the logs for that. And by cleaning it up, notes suddenly worked magically again, and it was affecting 2 people. So not every issue is going to be in the log file. You can check for access issues. You can, ping times are always good to do. Finding out what their access times are, going through and doing a notes port trace to the server and seeing what they see and plotting that against your own results. And they can just, upon the results, you can copy and they can email that to you. So, and it depends, are they internal or external? Because if they're coming in and it's a web-enabled app and they're coming in through there, then you're going to want to check the Domino log or whatever the type of web logging tool you would have in addition to the log NSF for access. So there's a lot of different clues and ways you can go through to look at this, and they're not always straightforward. And sometimes it's going to be a very niche case, such as a checkbox in the ACL or a damaged ACL. Actually, this was common. I had to pull a new replica last time. I also had a $ users view, which is used for access. So that's where, when you go into a database and you do to see if you're authorized, that's one of the ways Domino goes through the authentication process. And that view was corrupt, and it was affecting only one person in the help desk. Everybody else was fine because there was a caching issue. He was a new user. He couldn't get on, and I found out that the $ users view was corrupt, and I replaced it, and suddenly his entire team was able to go in, and they had much better performance gains as a result of fixing that. So you just never know where this is going to take you. You just got to kind of feel your way through it sometimes.
One common scenario I have on support scenarios, the web applications are simpler than the Notes client applications, because web applications are running on the server, and if your application prints enough log to the screen or to any other logging facility, for instance, an open log database, etc., you can check logs, you can check URL history, you can check access logs, etc., every kind of stuff. But Notes applications are difficult. One trick you can use you can use the you can have a debug mode that prints everything about a specific part of your code. The problem there, the print command will create an output at the status bar in the nodes client, and it will not be logged in the local client. But there was a nodes ini parameter which adds every kind of status bar logging into local log NSF file. So I have used that kind of debugging in a couple of scenarios, and this has very advantage on the support scenarios. Another thing is, if you watch Dr. House, you know everybody lies. So you ask the user if they have any error, they will say no. So always, if you are presenting an error to the user, always save that error into a print, into a log file. I strongly suggest using OpenLog database by Julian Rabushow at OpenNTF. That can be used quite simply from the load script code, from the Java code, from the XSpace, thanks to Paul Wieder's XSpace OpenLog Logger project. I strongly suggest using such logging facility on your production application. It helps a lot.
Okay. All right, good. Let's move on to another question. Rick has a Java server-side JavaScript memory leak, and after about a week, it crashes his server. Any suggestions on debugging that?
I have not used server-side JavaScript for over 2 years, but the last memory leak problem was just about recycling. So recycling is also needed on server-side JavaScript. If that's the same problem, in my case, for instance, I have been running a big loop around many documents, and it was crashing because of the recycling issue. There were some questions on the Stack Overflow, as far as I remember. You need to understand the recycling process, and server-side JavaScript is not an exception. All kinds of Domino stuff, Domino objects leave a trace, and that trace has a physical link between the object itself and its CAPI representation, and that handle is limited. That handle count is limited. OpenNTF Domino API, using OpenNTF Domino API is a great best practice, and using recycling even on server-side JavaScript is always recommended, even in a simple case, because people are generally scaling that kind of handle limit in a loop on the document level. So if you are looping around 1,000 documents, you may think that you cannot pass to 20,000 handle limit. But the issue is when you pull a field, it's a separate handle. When you pull a datetime object from a field, it's a separate handle. So you can easily exceed the limit of handles even on a small loop databases. So I strongly recommend using Java and OpenNTF Domino API. It's helping great, especially such memory leak issues.
Okay. Yes, and I second that myself. I try to use the Domino API almost exclusively, and I haven't actually done this, but I've heard that you can actually can use the Domino API with server-side JavaScript as well. to avoid having to recycle. But I think, Sridhar, you're very, you make a very good point. I think most developers who are writing server-side JavaScript don't realize that they have to recycle when they're doing loops and in general recycle everything at the completion of their code. So if you're writing server-side JavaScript, you might want to read up on that and also look into using the Domino API, which is available on OpenNTF. So let's see, I think we're pretty much out of questions at this point. I will say, Sridhar, going back to our previous question, Rick, who asked the question, said he does recycle. Is there any other suggestions to try to find memory leaks? Any tools that you've seen?
Yes, there is a memory analyzer, memory dump analyzer. It is I can find it and add it to the post-session notes about this memory analyzer. So that was a tool I'm mostly using on memory leak crashes, especially with state data, etc. So basically, you just force HTTP task to create a memory dump, and you can analyze that memory dump. It seems meaningless, just meaningless garbage when you look at the memory dump, but at some points they may provide a clue about what is really causing the dump, because especially in server-side JavaScript runs in a sandbox model, something like sandbox. So when you see the memory dump, you can also see the line of code where it's leaking. But apart from recycling, I had no issue about memory leaks. Maybe asking on Stack Overflow with a specific code might be helpful. But I will send the memory analyzer tech note from IBM to you, and you may add into session notes.
Okay, and also the memory, the ability to generate the memory dump, you can do that from the XPages toolbox. The XPages toolbox is a number of great tools for analyzing performance, one of which is to generate the memory dumps. And I believe the instructions on the XPages toolbox tells you how to get the memory analyzer tool, which is a tool you can get from Eclipse, I think it is, but then you need a special IBM plugin to handle the IBM specific file formats. So I think all that information is on the XPages toolbox project, if I remember correctly. Okay, great. Well, I think we're running out of time and questions. So I'd like to thank Sridhar and Bill for the great presentation today, and thank my co-host Courtney for her participation as well. And so I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you in our June webinar. Thank you.